Okay, so today we are going to talk about Saul Bellow, and he is the author of the novel, rather I should say it's a novella, it's a very short one, titled Seize the Day. So he is a charismatic personality as well as an intellectual. He's also charismatic, so I'm going to just shed some light on it. Okay, that's his picture. You can see one of his photographs available on the internet. Very briefly, we can say that Saul Bellow, and his original, actually, his name was Solomon Bellows. He was born in June 10, 1915, and he died on 5th April 2005. And he was a Canadian-American writer, and he won Pulitzer Prize, and also he won Nobel Prize, and he won both the prize in the same year in 1976. And especially his characters, especially his protagonists in his novels, they are very interesting and they're very important because of their intellectually his protagonists are curious at odds with the contemporary world. That means they have a different kinds of understanding about the contemporary world, and his protagonists, they want to know the contemporary world and does actually have some problems. That's why it's called at odds with the contemporary world. That is, they found it difficult to cope up with the contemporary world. Then again, you can see here he says that for his literary achievements, he was conferred the National Book Award for fiction 3 times. So National Book Award is a very prestigious award, and it was given. It's given to the famous writers in USA, and he won that award 3 times for his contribution to the literature, especially in the fiction. And also he won the Pulitzer Prize and Nobel Prize that I've already mentioned earlier in 1976. Then I can move on to the next slide. As you can see in the slide 4, very briefly, we can see that what his contribution and also a little bit about his life. So although I have mentioned some of the facts, now we can skip some of this from here. And let's see, now let's talk about his education. He started his education in his school, in his place, and later on he started his graduation from the University of Chicago, and he started studying literature. And he got his admission there in 1933. But in 1935, he left the University of Chicago, and then he went to Northwestern University. There, he didn't continue his study with the literature. He started studying anthropology and sociology, which is very interesting. Then later on, after having his graduation, then again he moved on to another university that is called the University of Wisconsin. And from Wisconsin University, he just called an end to his academic career, and then he went back to Chicago again, and he started his career as a fiction writer, or we can say, he started his career as a writer there in Chicago after leaving the University of Wisconsin. Among his selected works, The Dangling Man, it was published in 1944, that's his first novel. Then later on he published The Victim in 1947, The Adventures of Augie March in 1953, Anderson, The Rain King, 1959, Hazok, which is a very famous one, 1964, then Mr. Samler's Planet in 1970, and Humboldt's Gift, 1975, then Ravelstein, 2000. And that was his last, you can say last one to the literature, that I will say 2000. Okay. Let's move on to the next slide. Right. Now, here, a little information about his awards and honors. So already we know that he won National Book Award 3 times, and he won this national award for his book titled Adventures of Augie March, Harjo, and Mr. Samler's Planet. So these 3 times actually he won the National Book Award in USA for these 3 books, and also he won Pulitzer Prize for his book Humboldt's Gifts in 1976, and in the same year he won Nobel Prize for Literature in 1976 again. And he was also awarded with National Medal of Arts in 1988. Actually, he got married 5 different times, and you can see the names of his wives, which is not that much important, but it's important. We'll talk about it in our coming slides. I have just put some information there because some of his characters, they reflect the characteristics of his wives, 5 wives. And also he had children like Gregory Bellow, Adam Bellow, Daniel Bellow, and Naomi Rose Bellow. All right, now in his early life, and it covers from 1915 to 1943. So let's see some facts about his early life. Saul Bellow was born in Quebec. It was in Canada. It's in Canada, Quebec. The youngest of 4 siblings. That is the youngest one is, out of all of his siblings. His parents were of Jewish Lithuanian ancestry and had recently immigrated to Canada from Russia. So you see, they used to stay in Russia. And when he was 9, they migrated from Russia to Canada. Later on, from Canada, they migrated to USA. So a debilitating respiratory infection he contracted at the age of 8 taught him self-reliance, and he took advantage of his condition to catch up on his reading. He credits the book Uncle Tom's Cabin for his decision to become a writer. So he was inspired by this book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. He read that book, and then he took the decision that after reading the book, he took the decision that he wants to be a writer. And at age 9, he moved to the Humboldt Park neighborhood of Chicago with his family, a city that would end up becoming the backdrop of many of his novels. His father worked a few odd jobs to support the family, and his mother, who died when Willows was 17, was religious and wanted her youngest son to become a rabbi or a concert musician. So you can see when he was 9, they moved to Chicago, and they used to stay in the neighborhood of a park titled that is called Humboldt Park. And you can see one of his works that is also titled, after this park, the Humboldt. And his father they were migrants. They immigrated from other countries, from Russia to Canada, then Canada to USA. So that's actually his father. Just to support his family, he has to do lots of odd jobs in USA. And when actually Bellow was 17, his mother died. And his mother, she wanted Bellow to be a rabbi. You know, rabbi, he is, you can say, a Jewish scholar. So his mother wanted to be a Jewish scholar or a concert musician. So that means his mother wanted to be either a rabbi or a musician, but he didn't pursue any of these careers. You can see the picture of Saul Bellow. Okay. Now his early life, again, it continues. Now Bellow didn't heed his mother's wishes and instead kept writing. So I told you that he was inspired when he read that book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, and he decided that he wanted to be a writer. So that's actually he didn't listen to his mom, and he didn't want to pursue those careers. That's rabbi or a musician. Interestingly, he had a lifelong love for the Bible, which started when he began learning Hebrew, and was also fond of Shakespeare and Russian novelists of the 19th century. He befriended fellow writer Isaac Rosenfeld while attending Tulane High School in Chicago. But this is very interesting. He started his education in Tulane High School. It was in Chicago, and there he met one of his fellow writers. He is called Isaac Rosenfeld, and they became friends at that time. And he was also inspired by the Russian novelists, and he read Russian novels, especially from the 19th century. And he was also fond of the Bible, and also he was very fond of Shakespeare. And he could speak Hebrew, and he could also speak English, French, Hebrew, and Yiddish. So he was expert in all these 4 languages. So in that sense, you can say that he was a polyglot. Then again, Bellow originally enrolled at the University of Chicago, but transferred to Northwestern University. I mentioned it just a few minutes back. Even though he wanted to study literature, he thought his English department was anti-Jewish. So he pursued degree in anthropology and sociology, which became important influences in his writing. He later pursued graduate studies at the University of Wisconsin. You know that he was from a Jewish background, so he didn't continue his study in the University of Chicago, and there he found that people there in the University of Chicago, they were anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic that we call in present days. So that's why actually he didn't want to study there anymore. So he moved on to Northwestern University. From there, he got his degree in anthropology and sociology. And later on, then he went to University of Wisconsin. And from here, actually, he ended his academic career. Here we can see he was a Trotskyist. Bellow was a part of Works Progress Administration Writers Project, whose members were in large part Stalinists. He became an American citizen in 1941 because upon enlisting in the army, where he joined the Merchant Marine, he found out he had immigrated to the United States illegally. Here, this is an interesting fact. You know, during the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 in Russia, or we can say Russian Revolution for our understanding, and Trotsky and Stalin, actually, they were, you can see, the two important figures in the Russian Revolution. They contributed, they were the leaders, the most prominent leaders out of all the leaders, Trotsky and Stalin, they were very famous. But Bellow, he supported Trotsky, but he didn't support Stalin, because Stalin and Trotsky, though they were from the same political party, but still they had some differences of opinions regarding politics. Trotsky, he was, you can say, he was highly educated, and he was a very good orator, and he was a very knowledgeable person. On the other hand, Stalin, he was a strategist rather than a good orator. He was not a that good orator, but he was a strategist, and he was very technical, and he was very shrewd in that sense, you can say. So you can see our Saul Bellow, he supported Trotsky, but not Stalin. And in 1941, you can see that he became an American citizen. Now, these are some of his early works, and they were critically successful. That means they were highly acclaimed by the critics for their literary value. You can say. His first novel was Dangling Man. It was published in 1944. Then 1947, The Victim, and The Adventures of Audrey Merson. It was published in 1953. But Seize the Day, that is our text for this semester. It was published in 1956, and also you can say Henderson, The Rain King. It was published in 1959. Now, during his service in the army, he completed his novel Dangling Man in 1944 about a man waiting to be drafted for the war. The almost non-existent plot centers on a man named Joseph, a writer and intellectual who, frustrated with his life in Chicago, isolates himself to study the great man of literature while waiting to be drafted for the war. So you can see this is a very briefly the plot has, or you can see the storyline has been given here. The Dangling Man. That is not that much important for us. Just remember that when actually he was he was in the army, he wrote this novel, Dangling Man. Then we can skip this slide and then we can move to the next slide. Okay. In 1947, Bellow wrote the novel The Victim, which centers on a middle-aged Jewish man named Leventhal and his encounter with an old acquaintance named Kirby Albee, who claims that Leventhal had caused his demise. Upon learning this information, Leventhal first reacts with annoyance, but then becomes more introspective regarding his own behavior. So that is also the storyline in a very brief manner, the novel titled The Victim. It was published in 1947. You can see Saul Bellow reading newspaper. Okay. Now, during 1960 and 1974, he wrote these two important works. One is Kajol, which is very famous. It was published in 1964. And another one is The Summer's Planet. It was published in 1917. Now, the Chicago years and commercial success. And this time spans between 1960 to 1974. Now, after living in New York for a number of years, he returned to Chicago in 1962. I told you that he ended his academic career with a university that is titled Wisconsin University, and after that he returned to Chicago in 1962, as he had been appointed professor of the Committee on Social Thought at the University of Chicago. He would hold that position for more than 30 years. That means he started teaching in the University of Chicago, and he continued teaching there for next 30 years. To Bellow, Chicago embodied the essence of America more so than New York. Chicago, with its, you can say, gigantesque outer life, contained the whole problem of poetry and the inner life of America. It's a famous line from Humboldt's Gift. Now, if you just take a look at his novel, especially The Seize the Day, you can also find that the setting, the place, it's in Chicago. And since actually he spent most of his childhood in Chicago and also his youth, so he was very much influenced by the life of American people at that time in Chicago. And Chicago at that time, it is a very important city. Still, it's one of the important cities in USA, but also it was one of the important cities at that time also. And he found lots of things, or lots of components or elements, or you can say inspirations from the society, or from the life of the life of Chicago, from people living in the Chicago. And that's why we can see in most of the settings, you can find the reference to Chicago time and again. Okay. This is another photograph of Saul Bellow. Next, I can jump to the next slide. Can you see the slides, on your phone or?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, that's great. Okay, Tushar, are you with us? Or?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's great. I would like to finish it very quickly so that you don't miss anything. Okay.
Okay, sir.
All right. Now, this is. He lived in Hyde Park. I told you that he was living in the different places, and especially in the Hyde Park, a neighborhood that was known as being a high crime area back in the day. But he relished it because it enabled him to stick to the guns as a writer. He told Vogue in March 1982, his novel, Kajol, written during this period, became an unexpected commercial success. The first in his life, with it, Bellow owned his second national book award. So you can see he lived in a place, especially in the neighborhood of the Hyde Park, and that place it was very famous at the time for crime, because lots of crime was going on around, and people were very, you can say they were very rowdy, or you can say some of them they were very anarchist in that sense. But he wasn't disappointed by all of this. Rather, he took inspiration, and he took some of the incidents from there, and then he transformed those things into literary pieces. Okay? Do you get my point, what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Yes. That means Chicago, where actually he was living, it wasn't a good place in that sense. It was full of crime, and some of the people they were involved in crimes. So he took inspiration from those incidents, and then he turned them into some elements of his literary works. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good. Now, we jump to the next slide.
Sir, can you speak slowly, sir?
Yeah. Yes, Tushar.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Tushar, what was saying?
Yes, sir.
Sir, আপনাকে একটু slowly আগাইতে বলছে।
Okay. I was thinking that maybe you people will run out of your MB. So
Yes,
that's
sir. It's too difficult. When you speak fastly, it's too difficult.
Okay, I'll go slow in that case. Because I have unlimited Wi-Fi system, so I don't have any problem with that.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, I can go slow, no problem. Okay. Now, so you see, 6 years after publishing Hard Rock, that is one of his very famous novels, then Bellow wrote Mr. Sandler's Planet. So you can see there is a big gap. So Hard Joke, he wrote it in when actually he wrote it, then after 6 years he wrote Mr. Sandler's Planet. And also, this novel also actually helped him to win the National Book Award for the third time. Now, these are some of the works, and he wrote these literary works within 1976 to 1997. So you can see the names on the screen. To Jerusalem and Back, a memoir. It was published in 1976. Then The Danes December, More Die of Heartbreak, A Theft, The Belarus Connection. It All Adds Up, an essay collection, 1994. It was published. And also there's another work. It's called The Actual. It was published in 1997. So these are some, a list of his works which were published during 1976 to 1997. Now let's talk about a little bit about his later work. All these works. Okay. In 1980s were quite a prolific decade for Bellow, as he wrote 4 novels: The Danes December, More Die of Heartbreak, A Theft, and The Belarus Connection. So you see, it says that at that time he was very prolific. During this time he wrote prolifically. That you can say. That means he wrote lots of novels, and also he wrote some plays. So these days, during 1976 to 1997, actually he wrote many novels and also plays. This is very important. Here, actually, I'd like to focus on, and just take a notice of this thing: the literary style and themes. What kind of themes actually usually he was fond of to introduce in his novels, and also his literary style. We're not going to talk about it in a very elaborated way, but I will just give you some ideas so that it will help you to understand the novel seriously. Now, here you see, starting from his first novel, The Dangling Man, 1944, all the way to Rebel Stain, 2000, Bellow created a series of protagonists who, with barely any exceptions, struggle coming to terms with the world around them. Joseph, Henderson, and Kajol are only a few examples. They are usually contemplative individuals at odds with American society, which is known for being matter-of-factly and profit-oriented. Now, let me explain these things to you. I will make it very easy for you so that you can understand it. Here, you see, I told you that his protagonists, they were all the time, you can say, a kind of a struggle to cope up with the changing situation, or we can say the very volatile situation at the time in USA. Because society was completely different. Two world wars actually were there, and that's why there were different kinds of changes in their social life. And at the same time, there were also this economic depression, or financial depression that we say it happened in the 1930s. So people's life was very difficult, and they had to struggle a lot to earn their livelihood. Okay, do you get my point? What I'm saying?
স্যার
Yes.
এটা একটু আরেকবার যদি বলেন বুঝি
No problem. Here, you can see, I will just read it from here so that you can follow me. Bellow created a series of protagonists. Protagonists means characters, main characters, you can say, who with barely any exceptions struggle coming to terms with the world around them. That means they were all the time in a struggle to come to terms with the world around them. That means they found his characters, especially, they found it very difficult to cope up with the society, with the traditional American culture at that time that is going on. Understood? So they were all the time, they were in a struggle. And he has already mentioned some names from some of his novels, like Joseph, Henderson, Kajol. So these are the characters that he is saying that these are the examples that they found it difficult to cope up with the American society at that time. Because financially, culturally, in every way, actually, you were challenged. They are usually contemplative individuals at odds with American society, which is known for being matter-of-factly and profit-oriented. So you see, his characters were contemplative. Contemplative means they were thoughtful. Understood? They were very
contemplative means
thoughtful. That means they like to contemplate on the situation and on their life. In that sense, you can say they're introspective. So his characters were introspective or contemplative, and at the same time they were at odds. That means they were struggling to keep pace with the changing American society, because American society, it was very vulnerable, it was very volatile, and it wasn't stable. It was, you can say, changing all the time, and they found it very difficult to cope up with that kind of society, the American society, you can say, because
Yes,
it
sir.
was, and because American society, it was completely in, you can say, related with industrialization, and at the same, that's why it was very profit oriented. So everybody was looking for profits. So very much people were very much self-centered. Understood? So nobody wants to help
Yes, sir.
nobody, and they were very self-seekers, self-centered. So that's why his characters, they found it difficult to cope up with this American society. Now, Bellow's fiction is rife with autobiographical elements, as many of his principal characters bear a resemblance to him. They are Jewish, intellectually curious, and have relationships with or are married to women that take after Bellow's real life. Now, here you see, even if you read the novel since today, then you will find that there are lots of autobiographical elements. That means elements from his own life. He has used those things as elements of his novel. Understood? That means
Yes, sir.
he used his own life story, his experiences in his novel as elements of the fiction. So that's why you can see many of his characters, they resemble to him. That means when you, if you have a good idea about his biography, then you'll find that in almost all of his novels, you'll find some references to his own personal life. And almost all of his characters are Jewish. That is, they were from Jewish background, all of his protagonists.
Jewish means?
Jewish means, in Bengali we call them Yehudi, Jewish, Jew.
Oh.
And intellectually curious. They were intellectually curious means they always want to know or want to explore the society and what is going on all around. So they were very, you can say they were very keen, or they were very keen observant about the American society. So they were intellectually curious. They wanted to know about the thing, what is going on in American society. And you can see almost all of his protagonists, they have relationship with women that you can find some semblance with this women, with Bellow's, women in Bellow's life. So Bellow's actually, he had lots of relationship with different kinds of women, and also he got married 5 times.
বেলোতের কি অনেকগুলো ওয়াইফস ছিল মানে রিলেশনশিপ
He got married 5 times. 5 times, not all of them together. I mean one after another. Some of them died, some of them actually he got divorced, just like this. Okay, so he married 5 times, and you can find the reference to his wives. I mean, just like his wives, you can find the women in Bellow's novels. Okay.
জি স্যার
All right. All right. Now, with Bellow being an academically trained anthropologist, his writing tends to put humankind at the center, especially with characters who appear at loss and disoriented in modern civilization, but are able to overcome their own frailties to achieve greatness. He saw modern civilization as a cradle of madness, materialism, and false knowledge. Contrasting these forces are Bellow's characters, who have both heroic potential and all too human flaws. Now, really interesting here, you see, with Bellow being an academically trained anthropologist. I told you that in Northwestern University, he studied anthropology and sociology. So he was a trained anthropologist. And in anthropology, this subject deals with the origin of human life, or we can say the human life, actually. They studied the existence of human life, and the origin of the human life. So that's why you will find that as an anthropologist, he will put his character at the center of the humankind, or you can say to put humankind at the center. So in his setting or in his plot, we'll find that man is the center. And also we can say, especially with characters who appear at loss and disoriented in modern civilization. And we can find that his characters, they are at loss. At loss means they don't know what to do. His characters are confused because the complexities of the American society is so huge that simply they don't have any control over it, and they are confused at what to do with this kind of life. Understood what I'm saying?
Sir, আরেকবার যদি
Here you see at a loss. His characters are at a loss. That means his characters are confused. They don't know how to handle this situation, the American society, American life, how to cope up with this society. Understood?
জি স্যার
All right. And also disoriented in modern civilization. So his characters are disoriented. Disoriented means the same thing. That means they don't know what to do. They're at a loss, and they simply can't put themselves, in the center of the modern civilization because they don't have good understanding of it. Or maybe the modern civilization is so complicated, it is so complex that his characters found it very difficult to get hold of modern civilization. But at one point, these characters are able to overcome their own frailties to achieve greatness. Do you understand? What does it mean, frailty? Frailty. Hello?
জি স্যার
Can anyone tell me what does it mean, frailty?
No sir.
Frailty.
No sir.
Frailty means the human, you can see that erodes in the characters.
Erodes in the character.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can say the weakness in character.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That means all of us actually, we have our own frailties. Nobody is above it. We cannot say that we are infallible. We cannot say that. So we have our own errors. We have our own mistakes. So just like that, his characters also, they have their own mistakes. But at one point, somehow they manage to overcome these frailties and they become great at the end of the novel. Okay? Okay. So, Bellow saw modern civilization as a cradle of madness, materialism, and false knowledge. So you see, just focus on these three different words. He saw that this modern civilization, that is nothing but it is madness. Cradle of madness means this present world. He's talking about the 20th century. That means his time. That is full of madness. It was crazy. The time was crazy. American society was crazy. Insanity was there, and also there was materialism. That is, everybody only material matters. Everybody was very self-centered, and they were all the time trying to have their own benefit. Everybody was looking for profit. Understood?
Sir, last line ta.
Where actually you didn't understand. Tell me. The madness and materialism, you understand these 2 points, right? That means the modern civilization, it's full of madness, and modern civilization is very much materialistic. You see, when do you say that he is very materialistic in his perspective? We say that means he only thinks about profit, making money, nothing else. Understood? You get
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is the problem with the modern civilization. And Saul Bellow, he saw the modern civilization, and that was his consideration. That was his outlook about the modern civilization. That is, it is full of madness. It was very much materialistic. And in the modern world, it was full of false knowledge. That means knowledge wasn't true. It is not authentic. Everything is, you can say, fake, false. Knowledge is false. Knowledge is fake. Nothing is real. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you can see when a person or a writer, when he has this kind of outlook, or when he has this kind of philosophy about the modern world or civilizations, and certainly actually he's going to show his characters in that way in his works. And we find it in his novels. And contrasting these forces are Bellow's characters who have both heroic potential and all too human flaws. So that's why you can say that sometimes Bellow's characters are called anti-hero. or we call them anti-hero or antihero, the way you pronounce it.
Untraditional hero.
You can also say traditional hero or anti-hero. Anti-hero means you have the quality of the, not the real hero, but you have lots of flaws. But still you are a hero. You have flaws, you are full of human flaws or frailties, but still you are heroic. You have the potential to be. That's what we call an anti-hero. They are not real hero, but they are hero with their flaws. Okay.
Ji, sir.
Right.
Mainly they are fake, sir.
So sorry, I didn't get you.
They are fake, man, not the real hero, right, sir?
I think anti-hero, I mean, from my point of view, I think they're the real hero. I mean, is it possible that a man, I mean, he is completely perfect and he doesn't have any errors and any frailties in his character? It's not possible. I told you, nobody is infallible. So, in one sense, though actually we don't find that much heroic adventures, or we can say, I mean, heroic action, we don't get from Saul Bellow's heroes, but still we can see that they have the character to, or we can see they have that attitude to be the hero, even with those mistakes. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now, there is his Jewish life and identity are central in Bellow's work, but he didn't want to be known as an eminently Jewish writer. So, though actually we can see that this Jewish identity, actually it is central in almost all of his novels, but still he didn't like the idea that people will call him that Saul Bellow is a Jewish writer, that he didn't like this idea. He just wanted to be a writer, but not a Jewish writer. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Starting his novel, Seize the Day, it was published in 1956, I've already told you. A longing for transcendence can be seen in his characters. This is particularly apparent in Henderson in Rankin, even though after experiencing bizarre adventures in Africa, he is happy to return home. So, I mean, he's saying that how actually his characters actually, they try, especially in the Seize the Day, the character, how actually he is trying to transcend in the American society. I mean, you know, transcendentalism is a kind of philosophy. That means you can transcend your soul, or you can transcend your existence as a character, and you can go beyond your physical existence. That is the very basic idea of the transcendentalism. So that's why we can see that sometimes his characters transcend. I mean, in that sense, they want to go beyond their physical existence, and they want to go to a different level of understanding of their life, and which is you can of course say it is very philosophical. In his prose, Bellow was known for his exuberant use of language. So you see, his language is very exuberant. That is, they're very, you can say, frolicsome, or you can say language is very. Can you tell me what is exuberant? Is it? Do you know what is?
Sir,
Extrovert.
Yeah, what does it mean, exuberant?
exuberant.
Exuberant.
স্যার লেখনীতে সৃজনশীলতা নাকি কথা আছে
জানি
রূপকতা স্যার এই টাইপের
Exuberant actually is related with ecstasy, happiness. You understand me?
happiness.
Happiness, or you can say spontaneity. You know, spontaneity, something which comes automatically from your heart. You don't have to try hard for it. So that is the exuberant use of language, which one in comparisons to Herman Melville and Walt Whitman. You know, Herman Melville and Walt Whitman, they're two very famous writers. Walt Whitman, especially, he was a poet, and Herman Melville, he's another novelist. So, and both of them, they're very famous. Our Saul Bellow, he is compared to these two great literary figures of American literature, Herman Melville and Walt Whitman, because of his writing style. Okay?
Yes, sir.
And Saul Bellow actually had a photographic memory, which allowed him to recall the most minute details. You understand photographic memory, right? Photographic memory?
Photographic.
Photographic memory means it's just like photograph. That means whatever you see, you can just can take a picture of that particular item or idea or particular thing into your brain, and you can preserve it. And whenever you need it, you can recall those things from your memory. Understood?
Yes, sir.
That means
Freezer moto.
his memory was very sharp. Understood? That means he,
Yes, sir.
I mean, usually he didn't forget anything. He could remember almost all of his life events. And whenever he needed, he could recall them,
Yes, sir.
and then he could use those events as his material for his fiction.
Mm.
Okay.
The time
Now
is
here's,
up.
okay. This is another photograph of. All right, now let's see what it says. A pleasure in metaphors, sparkling metaphors, a wonderful description of Lake Michigan, which is just as a list of adjectives of the kind that Melville would have loved. I think it goes something like the limp silk, fresh lilac drawn water. You can't get much better than that, he said. He often referenced and quoted Proust and Henry James, but interspersed these literary references with jokes. So, you know, he was I told you that he was highly educated, so he would like to quote, especially from the very famous writers, especially from Proust and Henry James, and sometimes he would quote those two literary figures, I mean, very jokingly, just to amuse people. Okay. Now, Saul Bellow's Women, I would like to give you a little bit of idea about it, so that you can find that some of his novels, you can find the reference to his wives. So here it says, Saul Bellow was married 5 times and was known for his affairs. I told you already that. He was very fond of women, and he had lots of relationship with different kinds of women. Like Greg, that was his eldest son, I mean his own son, and he was a psychotherapist. So who wrote a memoir titled Saul Bellow's Heart, and it was published in 2013. So Mr. Greg, he is writing about his own father. Okay?
Mm.
So he
Yes,
described
sir.
his father as an epic philanderer. So he's saying that his father was an epic philanderer. Do you understand it? What does it mean, philanderer?
No, sir.
Just for your understanding, I can give you another, not exactly the synonym, but just to help you to get the meaning. Womanizer. You understand the word womanizer?
No, sir.
Philanderer means actually people, especially, I mean, it is used for the for male. That is who people who have lots of relationship with lots of women.
Playboy type.
I don't want to
Hey,
say it
এটা
in
কেমন
that
করে?
way, not exactly, but for your understanding,
তার
you can say,
ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজটা ঠিক করে বলা উচিত স্যার।
no. For your understanding, it's okay. Because you see, his son was a psychotherapist and he was an educated person. How could you say that my father was a playboy? He didn't want to say. That's why he, I mean,
কিরকমের কথা ভাই?
euphemistically, just to soften the effect. So he is saying that epic philanderer. Epic means, you know, here epic, it has been used, I mean, just to understand, to make us understand the intensity. Epic means something which is huge. You understand? Something which is
Yes, sir.
so epic philanderer. Certainly, I mean, he was a playboy or womanizer, you can say. Now, what was the reason? Now, he is, I mean, critics are also saying that what was the reason that why actually he was a philanderer? Now, the reason why that is, this is relevant is that his women were his literary muses, as he based a number of characters on them. That means, I mean, I think it's a kind of lame excuse. I mean, all the time you have to have relationship with lots of women so that you can get inspiration for your writing. Personally, I don't believe so. It may happen with some people, but for literary muses or for literary inspiration, you must have relationship with lots of women so that you can get material out of those relationships and you can use those material in your writings. I mean, it's not always, I think I can support it in that way. So that is the thing about Saul Bellow's Women. I don't want to talk about it more. Now, his legacy. Saul Bellow is widely regarded as one of Americans' most notable writers, whose wide variety of interests include sports and the violin. In 1976, he won both the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction and Nobel Prize in Literature. I have already mentioned it. In 2010, he was inducted into the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame. And this is a very prestigious thing. Excuse me. Chicago Literary Hall of Fame. While he was a critically acclaimed author since the beginning of his career, he only became commercially successful when he published Kajol, aged 50. So you see, he got success as a literary figure when he was 50. And this commercial success came with the novel titled Hard Joke. I told you that he was very famous, and with this one, he became very popular in the literary world. And he was one of the most dominant Jewish writers who shaped 20th century American literature. Philip Roth, Michael Chabon, and Jonathan Safran Foer are indebted to all of this legacy.
So, what is the meaning of
Yes, go on, please. Yes.
Hall of Fame? Sir, what is the meaning
Sorry, could you please repeat it? I couldn't hear you. What is the meaning of?
of Hall of Fame?
Hall
Sir,
of Fame.
Hall of Fame.
No, this one.
Hell of Fame.
Hall of Fame. Okay, Literary Hall of Fame. Now, you see, Hall of Fame is a place where only the famous people's photograph will be shown along with their biography. Understood?
Yes, sir.
If I am a very famous
Yes, sir.
person, then only in that case I will get a chance. And it is very prestigious. Not all the people, all the literary figures, they have this chance to be a part of this Hall of Fame. But in 2010, you see 2010, he died in 2005. So even after after his death, 5 years after his death, he got inducted in this Chicago Literary Hall of Fame. That is, only the famous literary figures, they have a place. Their photographs and their biography and other stuff will be kept in the Hall of Fame. So it is very prestigious, understood? And you see, he was a very dominant Jewish writer of 20th century American literature, and he influenced lots of writers. For example, here are three of the very famous writers, or we can say literary figures from USA: Philip Roth, Michael Chabon, and Jonathan Safran Foer. So these people, they followed his style, his writing style, and they also idealized him, you can say, in one sense. So this is another photograph of Saul Bellow, as you can see. And that's it. So with this, actually, I want to conclude my today's lecture. Now, if you have any question, you can ask me. I would be very happy to answer those questions. Do you have any question?
No, sir.
So, writer কি স্যার Jewish ছিল?
Yes. He was a Jew, and they migrated from Russia to Canada, from Canada to USA. And he spent most of his time in Chicago.
Yes, sir.
Anything else?
No, sir.
All right, in that case, I'd like to conclude today's lecture here, and thank you very much for joining me. And I hope that in future we'll come up with more topics and you will participate the way you participated today. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, talk to you next time and take care of yourself.
স্যার স্যার আমাদের কি কাজ হবে মানে সেম টাইমে?
I will let you know. Don't worry about it. If there is a meeting, then I will give you notification.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Notify beforehand,
Okay.
then you can come to know about it.
Thank you, sir.
That's okay.
We are waiting.
Thank you so much, sir.
Stay safe and take care of yourself.
You too, sir. Take care of yourself, sir.
Thank you very much.
You too, sir.
Talk to you next time.
Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.
সবাই ভালো থাকিও।
Allah Hafiz.
Bye.
মেসেঞ্জারে আছে সবাই।
Sir. Assalamu alaikum.
হ্যাঁ, তুই আচ্ছা, স্যার আসসালামু আলাইকুম।